Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another DCM webinar. We've got a fascinating subject today, and we've also got a fascinating group of panelists who are joining us. My name is Chris Baines. I'm the CEO of the DCM Group. The subject of today's webinar is leveraging data to boost your bottom line in the residential aged care sector in particular, but it also carries across to home care, retirement living, and so on. I'd like to introduce our panelists. Fiona Caldwell is the Chief Information Officer for Estia. She has been with Estia for 6 years. She has a fascinating background. Prior to Estia, she was with Village Roadshow. She was Head of Strategy, Architecture, and Project Delivery. Prior to that, she was with Senitex. She was Chief Information Officer there for 3 years, and Senitex was the IT arm of the Victorian government, a challenging role. And prior to that, she was General Manager Business Systems for the Tats Group, so Tats Lotto and so on. So an array of experience across both the public and the private sector. Tony Judd from Catholic Healthcare is joining us. He is the Data Warehouse and Business Intelligence Manager for Catholic Healthcare. He's been with them for 17 years and he's grown through the system, so nobody knows the aged care sector from a data point and IT point better than Tony, from an operational point and so on. And finally, we have Paul Brindle, the CEO of Health Metrics. Paul also has a fascinating background. He's been the CEO of Health Metrics for 2 years. Prior to that, he was with Thomson Reuters, and he's actually based in Switzerland. And he was a Senior Vice President, Global Head of Product Strategy, a demanding role and a global role. And prior to that, he was here in Australia as a partner with PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC. So the purpose of today's webinar is to discuss leveraging data to boost your bottom line. And this is obviously about, in residential aged care in particular and home care, we have data in many different silos across operations, HR, finance, property even, and in an increasingly regulated world. And where every cent is of great value and the expenditure of every cent impacts the quality of service that is given to residents, utilizing data and drilling down through data and making it useful is of absolute importance. So if I could just pass over to Fiona, if you could just give us a rundown, Fiona, of the size of your team. And I'm asking to do this because I'd like people to understand the resources that each of the panelists have, remembering that the people who are watching this webinar, they might only have one facility, or they might have 5 and 10 up to 70 odd, as you have with Estia. So they each have different levels of resources, which is going to be pertinent as we go through this conversation. So over to you, Fiona.
Yeah, thanks. So Estia Health has 73 residential aged care homes at the moment, and the size of the IT team supporting that is 35 people. 4 of those are in our data space. Our data program's been running for about 4 or 5 years. We started with a team of 1, and it's probably only more recently that our data team is now a team of 4.
So obviously when you arrived, it was a team of 1. And were you
No, they were the team of 0 when I arrived. Yeah, so the IT function was very small when I arrived. So we've grown progressively over a number of years, over the nearly 6 years I've been with Estia. But initially, yeah, we started off with no one in the data function, and it was one of the sort of early projects that I kicked off as part of moving into the future world.
Thank you very much. Tony?
Yeah, so I think from an IT perspective, we're sort of 36 plus and growing a little. And from a data team perspective, we're sitting around 6 at the moment. And probably a similar story about sort of the inception of perhaps data in our organisation. When I first started, there was no data team. It was purely more service desk oriented. And as things have changed over time, obviously realising the value of that, we've grown the team. I inherited the team about 7 years ago, and it was a much smaller team then. There was same sort of thing. There was 2 of us, and then it's gradually grown to the team of 6 that we've got now.
And Tony, for the audience, can you explain the size of Catholic healthcare?
Sure. At the moment, we're 40 plus homes, and then obviously we have community care as well on top of that we service.
And you also have retirement villages.
We do. That's correct.
And you're basically New South Wales.
New South Wales, a little bit into Queensland. It's just a small footprint there at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And both you and Fiona would be gearing up for continued growth, I assume.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just telling Tony before, we've actually got 2 homes that are transitioning from Royal Freemasons Tuesday next week. So yeah, we've continually working through those sorts of acquisitions.
Thank you very much. And Paul, can you tell us about the size of Health Metrics and your staff levels?
Sure. We're a team of about 70 people, but I'd in particular highlight our customer base. It does include the larger providers. Estia and Catholics are customers of ours with eCase. But we also have customers at the other end of the spectrum, a bit like Tony, Chris, what you mentioned in terms of the attendees here today. We do have customers of ours that might be managing less than 100 beds at a single location, with very limited technology budgets and a small in-house tech team, and certainly a team that doesn't exist of data management experts. So certainly our customer base is very broad, and our offerings to the market really reflect that. So I'm really interested and looking forward to this conversation.
Well, we might ask you to just kick off the conversation if we can, Paul, in terms of, can you explain, what is data for the purpose of this webinar? What is data? Where is it located such that, we're trying to leverage it? And what are the benefits of mining it appropriately that you're seeing from one operator through to 70 operations?
Sure, and I'll bring it sort of back to a little bit of my journey in the last 2 years. As you mentioned, I'm new to the aged care industry, been with Health Metrics for only 2 years, and prior to joining Health Metrics, I managed a number of technology businesses of various shapes and sizes, both locally and globally, across a range of different industries. But we were very much focused on providing solutions to help manage compliance, process workflows, financial reporting. And so I've personally seen the value that can be delivered through good data management and the leverage of what I would call out-of-the-box technology solutions to deliver real value through actionable insight. I've learned in the last 2 years, as people on the call here would know better than I do, the challenges that the aged care industry faces: inadequate funding, workforce shortages, an ever-increasing compliance and regulatory burden, low occupancy rates, things that are all impacting the bottom line, whilst at the same time there's a need and a desire to deliver great care. And I hear a lot about the opportunities that providers are seeking to capture through acquisitions, as you just heard from Estia, greenfields development, both in residential aged care and retirement living, and of course expansion into home care services. And what I've learned from my prior experiences, and certainly coming into this role, is that good business decisions, improving the bottom line, in part comes from having the right data at your fingertips to provide real-time access to data delivered in a really repeatable and reliable way. And that does involve an investment in technology to gather, harness, digest, and report out on data and in ways that provides actionable insight to drive the right sorts of investment decisions and operational decisions and care-based decisions that providers need to make.
So actionable insights is seems to be the operative word, isn't it? Is that the view of the panel?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, you go, Tony.
No, you're right. I was going to say that's the thing. I think it's about having the right data at the right time, and then actually being able to do something with it. I think we've all probably spoken about this before. Is quite often data will be captured without any thought of how it's being used. So yeah, very important.
So what's the first step for a person, an executive, who's looking to be more meaningfully active in data mining? What's the first step that they should take? Both you, Tony, and Fiona had nobody looking at data when you first, 7 years ago. What was the first step you took?
Look, I think there's probably a couple of things. So probably understanding the area you want to focus on first, because there's obviously a lot of data, and if you try and focus on everything, you're trying to boil the ocean. So it's good to start with what are the key questions that you really need to answer, and what are the insights around those questions that are really going to add value. Because if you try and it's easy to get lots and lots of data, but if it's not actually driving you to an outcome, then it's not that actionable insight. So really just that really good understanding of what's the questions you're trying to answer, and what will you do when you know that answer? Like, will it create an action, and focusing it from there.
Tony,
I think that's really important. I was just sort of thinking back from experience. If I sort of think about really early in our piece, we had a lot of our data was probably around finance related items and not so much the other. A lot of the regulatory stuff was obviously back in the day was very paper based and compiled and what have you. So our primary focus is around the finance area. And then for us to move into some of those other areas, understanding, exactly that, what are the things that you're wanting to manage and be able to action? What are those items? And we found that a real challenge early in the piece to do that. And we actually, took a few, I'll use the word, attempts to implement things. But largely, you've got to have that. It's really got to come from a business. I think it's really about understanding what are those things that they need, and is it actually actionable as well. It's back to that point earlier. If you're just capturing data for data's sake, you'll end up with lots of data, but it might not actually do anything for you.
And so is it a matter of management? Your colleagues come to you and say, this is an area that we want to find information, or is it a matter of in the IT department knowing what data you've got that you develop a strategy?
I think from my mind, there's probably a bit of both. So I think there's always going to be something that's driven by the business. There's always going to be that need from perhaps more of an operational perspective. But I always sort of think that as you're working through that process, and one of the things that I promote is, looking at the data, and maybe you do surface or uncover something that perhaps is useful for the business. Maybe they've thought about it previously, maybe they haven't, but just, having that bit of oversight into it, can be helpful as well.
So Fiona and Tony, how often do you sit down with your team and say, well, what is the best use of what areas are going to be we're going to find the most gold? Where do we go? Is that how you go about it? Do you have strategy meetings amongst yourselves, or do you have strategy meetings with your leadership team across the business, and they identify areas that you figure out that I might be able to do something?
So I think when you've got a data program, and Tony's probably experiencing a lot of this, you get a lot of demand coming to you. Everyone wants something, and there's too much to do, and there's not enough resource to do everything that everyone wants. What we've actually done within our business is my head of data comes and presents to the executive team on a regular basis, and we talk around priorities and really trying to focus on what's going to add the most value to the business. She's actually coming to talk to our next exec meeting in October to work through the priorities. I think we're probably focused on workforce. A lot of people are focused on workforce and workforce data sets at the moment, because we're all trying to better utilize the limited workforce we've got, thinking about overtime, thinking about high agency use, and just trying to optimize that whole workforce piece. So that's a big piece that I think everyone's thinking about. But yeah, we do take that prioritization piece to our executives to make sure we're actually focusing on things that are going to add the most value for our business, and not kind of a pet project or an area that one particular person wants to delve into.
Is that the same for you, Tony?
I was just going to say I'd agree. We tend to sort of meet with our with a team once a month around that sort of prioritisation piece as well. So we go down that path. As far as, you know, being innovative and having the opportunity to do that, I think at the moment that's probably more of a luxury item. So it's really about meeting demand and keeping up with that demand, I think, at the moment, due to resourcing and I guess as well, it's the sheer volume that comes through at once. So if we think about all the stuff that has been happening recently around you know, NQIPs and QFRs and all of those other pieces, there's been a lot of work in that to bring some of that information together. So we have a lot of information in our environment that's built into sort of data warehouses that we can leverage and use. But there's always something that falls outside of that as you go through these journeys and you're refining things. And it's a matter of bringing all that together. So there's a lot of workforce required to do that, or from our team sort of perspective. So I think some of the other stuff, it does bubble in the background, but it's probably more in an ad hoc manner at the moment. So, you know, the goal for the future would be to get on, you know, hopefully get on the front foot with regulatory. And being in the industry for a while, I found that regulatory reporting, as it was mentioned earlier, it's ever changing, the demand's ever increasing. So there's always something happening there, but it's just trying to control that a little bit more, and making it easier for everybody, not just ourselves.
So Paul, because Health Metrics has a breadth of clients, you would be, I'm assuming that the likes of Fiona and Tony and your other clients are actually picking up the phone and calling Health Metrics and say, can we do this, can we do that, or can I get access to this data? So much of that strategy thinking has been done over the years, and would I be right in thinking that that's now built into certain elements of Health Metrics?
Well, we certainly continue to build out and enhance our reporting capabilities and data harnessing activities as well. eCase, which, you know, is used by both Estia and Catholics right through to our smaller customers, is a single platform that is designed to meet clinical, financial, and operational needs of care providers across the aged care industry. It holds a really rich set of data across all aspects of a provider's business. So, you know, it could be right at the start through to from an early inquiry via a CRM, right through to the entry in the ongoing clinical care, right through to final discharge of a resident. So there's a lot of data that is held within eCase. Some of it is created directly in eCase. Some of it comes through third-party integrations with other software technologies that providers might be using. And I think historically, the solutions in the market have been very much focused on gathering that data and doing perhaps the bare minimum that is needed in order to satisfy compliance and regulatory requirements and to deliver day-to-day care as well. But we are investing a lot in new product development around reporting, the harnessing of data, the building of KPI dashboards, and they're a mixture of clinical and operational and financial KPIs that access that data to generate dashboards to provide some actionable insights. So let me give a couple of examples of some recent developments to sort of make this real for people that are listening in. So for example, we have an ANAC classification summary dashboard, and that tracks how many residents in each facility are of a certain class with a real lens on revenue. We have the ability to track how many care minutes you would need to roster for residents. From a clinical perspective, we know that consent is very topical right now. We've built a report that tells you when your psychotropic consent register needs to be reviewed, and another report which tells you when that has become overdue. We have an antibiotics unlinked report that essentially tells a story of how infections are being treated with antibiotics, and that report gathers data from multiple data sets. From one data set, for example, where the prescriber is prescribing antibiotics, and another data set that looks at the relevance of those antibiotics to infections. So we have dozens of these reports. We've just had a release that has released a new bunch of reports. We've got more to come. There's dozens, and it's important to know that these are out of the box functionality that providers should be looking for. As we said in the intro, a number of our clients and a number of listeners on the call here today are smaller providers without the tech and the data expertise that the bigger providers have. So we look to the bigger providers as well as the smaller ones to build out that out-of-box functionality that we believe provides real insight to our customers, the providers, to make more informed decisions.
You mentioned there a couple of times dashboards and so on. In our earlier conversations, the point has been made, it's very well to have the data, but unless it's in a format that not only the data experts can read and understand, it has to be for other people in management or even on the shop floor that they can follow it. So I assume Health Metrics has an ability to create those dashboards.
Yeah, and the dashboards are intended to be used not by data experts or necessarily technology experts, but frontline users, be that the sales organization with CRM data or the finance department for finance data, but the carers as well. So some of those KPI dashboards that I just mentioned then are very much intended to be used by the frontline carers themselves. So very much user-centric based when we build out these reports to ensure that they are usable, repeatable, and real-time as well. Under the hood, that's where all the techies get involved, you know, the Tonys and so on of the world, in our team at least, that understand the management of data to allow us to produce these reports out of the box for our customers.
Sure. We've just received one question from the audience, so it's to Fiona and Tony. How do you manage data collection without creating additional workload for teams on the ground who are already feeling day-to-day workplace pressures?
Good question. I think from our perspective, it's really about removing. People talk about, we're talking about paper-based information earlier, perhaps, and then the spreadsheets and documents and different ways of recording information. Generally, for us, it's really around having a system in place to capture that information. So there's, one point of entry. And if we're talking about something like Health Metrics, obviously there's a wealth of information that is entered in there by teams around the regulatory compliance stuff. So that information is one point of entry, and we can then pull that data from there, and then we can blend that with other items and if we need from other systems that is the same. It's at one point of capture. Saying that, we still have a few systems where there may be, a couple of systems that are providing a similar functionality for different business units, and those are things that we're looking to sort of align to have that central point of entry. But that's our basis for data capture.
And Fiona?
Yeah, we do the same. So, for instance, with the recent NQIP changes, first thing we did was have a conversation with Health Metrics about getting some of the new indicators as part of our standard Health Metrics application, so we could capture them through normal day-to-day processes. And then we focused really on streamlining the extraction, collation, and submission processes to make that whole end-to-end process easier.
Thank you. The thing that I always worry about is you can get too much information. So how do you go about streamlining what it is that you provide people?
Well, I can give my perspective on that. I mean, yes, there is can be an overload of data within an organisation or within any one application, like an eCase. We very much focus on understanding the pain points that providers are seeking to solve, and the types of data that they need in order to understand, you know, what type of insight that they're looking for. So I think it was mentioned earlier. It's coming back to understanding what are the decisions that you're looking to make, be they bigger strategic, longer term investment type decisions, or more sort of operational, tactical decisions to improve business outcomes. It's understanding what those problems are, and then working through what are the data points that you may need, and then working through how to access that data. So it's starting small at the problem, as was mentioned earlier. It's not trying to boil the ocean, and it's iterating through a problem and then ultimately coming up with the solution, which in our case is building out of the box reporting capability. But I would also call out, and particularly for the larger providers who perhaps do have the expertise and the capability to do more with data, and perhaps play around a little bit more and to try and understand what the art of the possible is, we do open up our tools and provide access to third-party reporting tools, be it a Yellowfin, or, you know, Microsoft has some great business intelligence reporting tools as well, to enable the large and perhaps more sophisticated tech and data operations to play around with the data to see what else you know, they can perhaps mine to solve for other problems.
An interesting question. If I'm a small operator and I don't have a team member yet with an emphasis on data, being able to analyze data, what are the skill sets if I'm looking to recruit somebody, what are the skill sets I'm looking for in that person? Is it an inquisitive mind? Is it a tangential thinker? Is it a creative thinker? Fiona, what do you look for when you're in a person who's going to work in your data group?
Good question. I'm trying to think what I do look for. I mean, obviously we look for people who have skills with the technology sets that we are working to, because obviously they've got to be able to pull data from different places and present data. So having those technical skills, and we use Microsoft technologies, so we live in sort of the Azure data warehouse and Power BI spaces. So technical is obviously one aspect. But I think the other one is really probably more that inquisitive nature. So really trying to understand data, how it comes together, how it can add value to the business, and then help them understand more about our business so they can make sure that they're directing efforts in the right places.
Tony?
Yeah, I think it's probably similar. Definitely tech obviously plays a role, because if you've got somebody who's aligned to what you're using, makes life a little bit easy. But I think definitely for me, it's about somebody who's got the curiosity, they are inquisitive, and also that keen to learn better. And that's not just from a tech perspective, it's about getting into the business as well and really getting amongst it and getting involved, I think. Because quite often as technologists, you can sort of be right behind the technology, but not necessarily out in front and understanding, you know, what are some of the pain points and how can we assist the business. And one of the things that I always try and push and sort of encourage around that is, you know, it's not just the business, it's about our clients, because that's the core of our business. They're the people that are impacted by all of this. So
that's a point I was going to lead up to, in terms of, is it important for your people to get out in the field and actually see the working environment? Because very early in this webinar, it was mentioned that workforce is the major challenge, and obviously making workforce more efficient is important. Therefore, do you need to be out on the factory floor, out in the field, to actually understand the workflow?
Yeah, I think it's really important for the connection piece as well. So it's really important to understand all of the workflow. And unfortunately, we probably don't get out, or a lot of teams don't get out as much as they should. But there's certain points in the year where we sort of make that commitment to do that. But I think there's the connection of seeing and connecting to the residents that we or clients that we care for. But then it's also looking at those pain points and seeing the job that the people do in our fields, and they're pretty amazing people. So just sort of seeing that and then looking and thinking, man, how can we make things easier up the chain so that they don't have to be worrying about how they manage data for regulatory compliance, worrying about whether they need to key it here, key it there. How do we do all of those things for them to lighten the load so that then they can, continue caring for our clients and residents and have that taken away from them? So yeah, very important in my mind.
And
I would just say, Chris, in terms of the workforce challenges, we certainly see, and I've seen this play out in other industries as well, but we certainly see the importance that technology and process has around driving workforce engagement, not just from an efficiency and a compliance perspective, but from an employee satisfaction perspective as well. So employees in the aged care industry want to provide care. They don't necessarily wanting to be using a certain type of technology, but they want technologies that enable an easy provision of care to residents. So certainly as we build out our tech solutions and roll them out to customers, it's very much with the employee, the user in mind. I've had conversations with a number of our providers, customers that have tied employee turnover and churn to the poor use of tech and the poor use of onboarding and training and the use of tech, where it's created frustration and angst amongst the workforce, and it has generated staff churn. So we certainly do see that there's a big role for tech to play, not just in driving an efficient workforce, but also enabling an engaged workforce as well.
Yes, I've heard many operators say that they can win or lose staff based on the quality of their tech, which makes sense, doesn't it?
Yep.
And we're looking at data and data mining. To give the audience an idea of the potential, could you perhaps, Fiona or Tony, give an example of a success that you're particularly proud of, that your team has achieved as a result of having an aha moment and saying, if we connect this to this, we might be able to achieve that?
I don't know if I'm going to talk about the one that's kind of the most aha moment, but I can talk about what we've been doing recently. So recently, we've been connecting our rostering time and attendance data with our recruitment data. And so we can make sure that we are recruiting in the right areas and recruiting of sufficient volumes based on understanding the gaps in rosters and shifts. So we're really trying to sort of cross-pollinate data to really understand what do we need to do. Are our effort focused in the right area with the right types of roles to really drive the right sort of recruitment? So that's a recent example of how we're doing things differently with data than we've done before.
And those efforts have been successful?
Yep. Obviously, recruitment is always a big challenge. There's not enough workers out there, but we're really trying to focus on there's a lot of things that go into recruiting, but trying to focus on making sure with data, we know how many roles we need to recruit and in what places, and we're focusing our efforts in the right areas.
The manpower challenge in that respect is incredible, isn't it, for the whole sector? Tony, and you?
I guess for us, there's probably been a few things. If I think at the moment, when we've been sort of working through the sort of the NQIP and the QFR, I was talking about those earlier, just uncovering some of the ways that we can do things better, and we might not be able to do it now, but we uncover a lot of things that we can use into the future, and sort of feed into planning and strategies for other items. So that's been a big thing for us. I think one thing that I think that was really good, I know it's a little bit, it was quite a while ago now, but we'd obviously played around with things like, ABS related data and statistical areas and some of those bits of information, a bit of geospatial, but we'd never really done a lot with it. It was really, plotting our homes on maps and things like that. And then through that whole COVID piece, everybody sort of, started using some of those things. So I think that you started uncovering, and there's a lot of stuff around, workforce again, and it was around sort of, mapping into the LGAs and looking at where our staff were. We've also done that with, and I'm sure we've all done that around sort of bushfire times or flood times, being able to analyse and look at staff and uncover other things in that as well, so that we can, provide services and continuation of services in those areas that are affected. So those are some good things, and there were some good things I think uncovered through some of that work.
Thank you very much. We've got a number of questions who are coming in, so I might post those if I can. Fiona and Tony, how do you analyse and then disseminate data to your teams at the home level so that it is digestible and meaningful?
I'm happy to jump in. I think for us, it was sort of mentioned earlier, I think, in having the information, perhaps not the information overload piece. So we tend to find that, when you're looking at reporting, you've really got to, it might be somebody higher up the chain that's requesting it, but I think that you need to also start looking further down to the audience of that reporting and making sure that, back to the point earlier, if you're dealing with a particular part of the business, you need to make sure that it makes sense for those guys and making it high level. I think one of the things at the moment, just as an example, something we've been working on, it really is a wealth of information that is being presented back to the business, and it's sort of from the business perspective. And the question for me out of that is back to the actionable piece. This information is something that you want to be able to action something out of. Is all of that information actually useful for that purpose? Or can we reduce that so that, people aren't overwhelmed with so much information? And that can then just funnel up to that high level we were saying before, where you get this sort of headline, a bit of information that's relative to your home perhaps, or region, and then you can actually then drill out into that data. So we tend to work that way and work with the business, as I said, to make sure that it's consumable by them.
Thank
and
you.
that's certainly, Chris, that's certainly consistent with the way we build our reporting capabilities out to our customer base. We recognise that there's a broad range of stakeholders that directly or indirectly access the data. Some of the data will be relevant at a board or a CEO level, and then other data and reporting is very much tailored to and focused on, in some cases right down to the single resident, the whole resident journey that takes place, and obviously everywhere in between as well. So it's very much tailoring to the need.
So if I look at the question carefully, it says, how do you analyse and then disseminate the data to your teams at the home levels so that it is digestible and meaningful? So I assume, and now that I think about the questions, and it's an interesting one, isn't it? Does that mean that you need to have a UX talent within your group who knows how to, so this is an important piece of data that we want to place before the person on the 2 a.m. night shift, when X occurs, such an alert crops up, or this is a statistic that they'll need, etc. So I assume it requires a UX type person to get involved with it. Would that be right?
Well, from our perspective, it does. I mean, we have UI and UX experts that help us build out our solutions, so that when a carer comes in to his or her shift and they log into obviously eCase, but other tools that they may be using as well, the right information is presented in a dashboard format to help them do work through that shift. So it's delivering up the right information at a user level. So yes, UX experience definitely comes into that.
Thank you. we've got two questions relating to AI. I'll read one of them. In the realm of aged care data, could you elaborate on your organisation's strategies and objectives for integrating artificial intelligence? Specifically, how do you envisage AI contributing to the improvement of elderly care services or the overall well-being of seniors based on the data you collect? Tony or Fiona?
No,
So I'll read the question.
no, that's all right. I'm happy to probably jump in. I think for me around the AI piece, there's probably a couple of pieces. One is about using AI, I think, as close to the client as possible, and what I mean by that is sort of more from perhaps an application perspective, and that's more about using the data to assist or prompt around issues perhaps in the clinical space. So whether that be, monitoring of, temperatures, whether somebody's sleeping, all of those different sort of or vital statistics, being able to perhaps monitor those items and then have something like AI be, consistently analysing and either alerting you to, to possible issues. I see that sort of being useful. When I say alert, it's more of an alert. It's not actually going to take an action on the item. It's really alerting somebody who then needs to perform some sort of action. So I think for me, that's a good use of it. I think there's also, AI, ML interchangeably, looking through the data that we do collect. So we're talking earlier about, uncovering insights. So, AI is a good way of perhaps uncovering some of that for you in a more automated and probably a quicker fashion, working across multiple data sets. So that's where I see it for us initially in the future.
The question says specifically, how do you envisage AI contributing to the improvement of elderly care services? When you wake up in the morning, do you think, we might be able to do this with AI and that would be wonderful?
Yeah, I think probably back to that thing of monitoring. So if I think about it at the moment, if you're looking at sort of back to staffing, if you've got staff that have to be, monitoring and monitoring a screen and being able to do all of those things to make sure that you're providing the best care to a resident, wouldn't it be nice if there was something assistive that gives you that information? So, as I said, you still need to do something, but I think that by being prompted to say, hey, there could be an issue here, then I think that could be useful and assist in the care of the resident.
Thank you. Fiona?
Yeah, I think it's still got a journey to go. I think, we're looking at use cases around sort of alerting and monitoring, which Tony talked about, and also use cases around getting better insights out of our data. But I think, we're all playing with it. I don't think any of us have got the kind of nirvana at this stage. It's a journey to go. I think what we're focusing on sort of as a first step is really making sure that data quality piece is there. Just because someone's entered a piece of data into a system doesn't mean that data is accurate, and really making sure we understand where there's anomalies in data and getting that quality piece right. So actually when it feeds into some of those AI engines, it's more accurate.
The second question on AI said, Paul has mentioned do more with data a few times. Do some of the advances in AI mean that businesses have the capability to do more in the space of data analytics and reporting to provide decision makers with information at a lower cost to produce?
I think a couple of things. I think there's, and I agree with the earlier comments by Tony and Fiona. I do think there's certainly a lot of hype around artificial intelligence and machine learning. I think for some that's a little bit of a step too far. I think it's bringing it back to the earlier parts of the conversation we've had about organising the data and understanding how with current capabilities, for us it's through our dashboards and the reporting capabilities that we have to deliver insight now and in an enhanced way. I agree with some of the comments earlier about the prompts and alerts, and we're certainly looking at what more we can do to generate some level of predictive analytics in an action-oriented way, and we're continuing to test the waters. And I'll give an example, and it's not related to aged care, but I think it's an example of the sorts of things that we're looking at to deliver increased value, to our customers over time. So we're partnering with Tanara Analytics. They're part of Tanara Capital. They're the owners of Health Metrics, to identify other value-add insights that we can generate through the better harnessing of data. And Tanara Analytics did some really interesting work in the childcare industry, which is also experiencing workforce shortages. So through the analysis of some very large data sets, they were able to link staff attrition or incidents taking place in a childcare location to staff attrition, and then they found the data links from that staff attrition to then parents pulling their children out of childcare because their children had lost the emotional bond developed with the childcare workers, and they didn't want to go back. So they were able to go back to these childcare providers and say, if you fix these or solve for these incidents that are happening in a childcare centre, we can see that will reduce the level of employee turnover that you have, and then by extension will reduce the level of churn that you see with parents taking their children out of childcare. So there was some real actionable insight there that was able to be provided to those childcare providers to improve their operations, reduce employee turnover, reduce turnover with families and children as well, to improve the bottom line. So these are the sorts of things that we're through access to data, bigger data sets, we're looking to build into the solutions that we offer the market. And to your point, Chris, about doing it in an affordable way, we're looking to do that in a way that is out of the box, part of our solutions, and is done in a repeatable way by frontline users, where you don't need the data expertise that perhaps some of the larger operators have.
That raised an interesting point. If I could ask Fiona or Tony, often one of the strategies is, if you haven't got an analytics team of your own, is to bring in an outside consultant who might specialize in the area of HR or finance or operations or what have you. Is that a worthwhile strategy? And what would be the cost to bring in a team like that? Tony, have you got a view?
Yeah, I'm happy to probably do that. I've used some external resources in the past as well, to obviously augment resource on occasion, and when the team is definitely smaller, and they are providers that tend to have staff that are specialised in the aged care industry, so that's a bit of a head start and a bit of a leg up. So I personally found that to be a good process for us. But I think it comes back to that fact, and I think others have spoken about it before, around the fact that the operational system being sort of eCase has a lot of reporting and information there that can be surfaced. But I think once you start getting out of that and you're looking at being able to put information together or blend information between systems. So if you're really looking at your finance and your HR and your clinical data, then that's where this sort of comes into play. And I think that can be worthwhile from our perspective, from a cost perspective. I mean, some of these, and there's obviously varying ranges, but I think that most of the people at the moment that we would deal with, and we don't do it regularly, is probably $2,000 to probably $2,500 a day. And then depending on the duration, I've had in the past, maybe 6 to 8 weeks, depending on what the scope is, you could have something usable.
That's a significant investment, but by the same token, an organisation of your size, if you can save 1% in one area, that's more than pays for itself.
Exactly.
and you might not be able to recruit that expertise. Yeah. We have another question that's come in. What is the role of data security in all of this? We've spoken about looking at data, analysing, reporting. The more data we bring into a central source, does this increase our risk of exposure? What should executives be considering on the security front with regards to what we are talking about here today? And obviously our friends at Regis would have a view on this.
Yeah, security is very important. When we stumped up our data program, we also stumped up our security program just before that. So I think when you're bringing all your data in centrally, just making sure that the place that your data is going to is secure, and then not just where you're holding the data, but where you're presenting the data out, making sure you've built in the right security controls around who has access to view various pieces of data. So for instance, data around employees shouldn't be viewed by everyone across the organisation, only people who really need to view that information. And so we've, at our data layer, we've put security at the row level, so actually on pieces of data in our data warehouse, so that we can make sure that only the people who need to see the data actually get access to it.
Danny?
Yeah, I think it's the same for us. So I think that, you know, it's not only the data piece. There's all around, and everybody's hearing about, you know, breaches everywhere. Cybersecurity obviously is the focus, and so is the data security as well. So it's much the same for us. Is yes, we have data in our source systems. We then put that into, you know, our data warehouse, and it is secure there by nature. But from that provisioning perspective, we operate the same way. So anything like HR or anything that is, you know, personal identifiable, that stuff is well and truly secured, or perhaps in some instances not in our warehouse for public consumption at all. So we tend to operate that way. Some of the information that we have is sort of transparent throughout the organisation. So we're talking about some of the clinical information may be sort of transparent between the homes, and others secure. That's from an internal perspective. But then there's that overarching security around having our data secure and encrypted, so that it's not available to the outside world.
How do you handle
the tech provider, Chris? Data security and the potential for cyber attacks is clearly front of mind for us in everything that we do, and it's an ongoing and regular topic of conversation at a board level, right down to, you know, into the depths of the organization. We know that we have very sensitive data, and we certainly take it seriously in terms of the security protocols, the regular penetration testing, the security certification we get, and so on as well. So it's definitely front of mind. We have customers, the majority of our customers, we do host their data on our, we manage that for them. Other customers will be on-prem and manage it themselves. Either way, to the point made earlier about admin rights and so on, we provide that capability to secure it, to protect it from cyber attack, but also providing the ability through admin rights and so on for the providers to set their own security protocols around how they want to manage access and so on within their organization.
And at what stage, this is a tangential question, Paul, but for you, at what stage do you think the federal government will be able to, you'll be able to interact with your data with the federal government?
Well, we have some level of integration now with the
department,
the departments and agencies, to enable funding and so on. To how far that goes, I don't know. My crystal ball doesn't go out that far. It's not that clear, Chris.
Right. Separate discussions. I think that's going to be a very interesting area over the next 2 years. We have a final question. Are you considering using the Internet of Things sensors to collect data, which goes back to our conversation 15 minutes ago?
Well, we certainly enable that through third-party integration. So some of our customers, aged care providers are using that sort of tech in their on site, and where appropriate, we do enable integration of those systems where the data is relevant to bring that into eCase. So we've enabled that up and open that up. I think that's playing out to varying degrees across the industry.
Tony, you had a thought there?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think for us, I was sort of thinking about things like our nurse call systems that we all sort of have. And I know that I've had vendors on occasion saying, oh, it's a great use case, but let's get some IoT in there. But I think at the moment that's sort of, managed. So it's probably not an issue. But thinking of some of the other sort of, perhaps IoT bit would be some of the things around perhaps workforce. So, things like you've probably heard of, obviously Microsoft HoloLens and items like that. So a bit of that augmented reality piece so that you can perhaps be able to, see on site what's actually happening, looking at perhaps wounds or residents remotely. So some of those sorts of things are a little bit in that sort of vein, I guess. So it's just another area that is of interest.
Fiona, have you got thoughts?
Yeah, generally I think there has to be a strong use case rather than just kind of putting in technology for the sake of putting in technology. So where we can see really clear use cases that are going to add value and we can roll out 73 times across 73 homes, we certainly invest in it. That's not sort of just putting IoT out there for the sake of capturing it and see what we can do with the data sets.
And as you mentioned the other day, every home is different.
Absolutely. Every home is different.
That makes it a little difficult to standardize, doesn't it?
Yeah. And, we've been trialing some technology in our homes around trying to do things smarter around monitoring and, just technologies are developing and some of them, need to take time to mature before they get to a point that they're really going to add value. So there's kind of a couple of aspects that we need to look at.
We only have a few more minutes left. So I was going to ask each of you, if I could, what excites you when you get up in the morning? What, looking forward, you're in the IT data world. So when you're looking at what can be done with data and how it can boost your bottom line, which is the subject of this webinar, Fiona, what excites you in the morning when you get up?
What
I hope something does.
Coming to work every day. No, I think for me, look, I've said earlier, so my mum's actually in a residential aged care home at one of our Estia homes. So I look at, when I'm looking at it, I look at it from multiple perspectives. So as a consumer, receiving services from Estia and also as an employee of Estia. And so a lot of what we're trying to do is really how do we add value to our end consumers and how do we make it easier in our homes so that, we're focusing on getting the compliance stuff right and our workers can just focus on delivering that sort of high quality personalized care rather than using technology and collecting data. So I think trying to get it right so it's easy in the homes to use technology is probably what excites me.
Thank you very much. Tony, what excites you first thing in the morning?
I think that sort of is similar for me as well. I mean, for me, it's really about the point that I was saying earlier around, making things easier up the chain so that when we're, providing care to our clients, our staff are freed up to provide that quality of care. So that's the thing that sort of drives me, is just making sure we can be part of that and not sort of lose sight of that.
And Paul?
Well, no offense intended to my previous employers throughout my career, but I do genuinely feel that now for the first time in my working career, I'm working in an industry that has a really strong purpose. Our purpose and my team's purpose is to enable the sustainable provision of care through society. And we know that what we do here enables that to happen directly and indirectly because of what we offer into the industry. So for me, it's that purpose. I know if we get things right, we can have a real positive impact on the provision of care to society. So that's what gets me and my team out of bed early and in the office.
Thank you very much. So Paul, we've run out of time. So what is your you know, you deal with clients from bottom to the top in terms of size. What is your one piece of advice in terms of leveraging data?
Well, technology in the aged care industry is developing at a rapid rate. I think historically it's perhaps lagged other industries, but it's definitely now developing at a rapid rate. We're part of that. I would encourage the listeners on this webinar to look at your current data management and reporting capabilities and tech capabilities. More generally, those systems need to be providing you with actionable insight to make real decisions. And you can start small, and you can start with out-of-the-box capability with modest investment. So I would encourage the people on the call to, you know, when they go, you know, back to the office after this call, have a think about what your current capabilities are. Is your tech giving you the right sort of information to make informed decisions at a strategic level, at an operational level, at a care level as well? And if they're not, then you should seek the right solution. And
also be able to present that information.
Right.
Because actionable insights has been the recurring statement, hasn't it? Visible, actionable insights.
That's right. Don't try and boil the ocean. Start small. Look at the pain points that you're looking to solve for, and seek solutions. And they do exist in the market. We're obviously part of that. They do exist in the market because, you know, these solutions have been built with the large customers in mind, with, you know, very sophisticated thinking and large data sets, but also down to smaller providers as well. So the solutions do exist in the market right now. We're obviously part of that.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. That's been a really, really interesting 60 minutes. It went really fast. We had a considerable number of questions, which shows that the audience is engaged. Fiona and Tony, thank you for your participation. Paul, thank you for yours. And for those who have been watching this webinar, thank you for your involvement. And we will see you next time. Thank you very much. Bye.